Webcasting around the world from the desert metropolis of Phoenix, Arizona, this is The Dividing Line.
My other doctrines of grace, and I held the position, I guess, of Norman Geisler, involved with the Calvary Chapel movement. And now I'm just wondering, I mean, the doctrines of grace are really dear to me, and like even just thinking about them makes me weep, makes me happy. And I'm wondering, now in fellowship with all kinds of brethren, and even hearing an Ergen Canner sermon he did at Calvary Chapel, Golden Springs recently, the implication of things such as the doctrines of grace shouldn't matter. We should get over our differences and just preach the gospel. I'm thinking to myself, like, how important, or where is the dividing line is my question.
It's right here. You're on the program right now. Sorry.
Because sometimes when you're speaking to somebody, they accuse you and they tell you, well, you're just being too doctrinal. You're being too dogmatic on things that aren't clear. But
they're the ones who are being doctrinal and dogmatic as well, and they just don't see it because they're taking Arminianism as the default position. I know it is obviously when you come to understand the sovereignty of God, the holiness of God, the power of God in the gospel, and others are still holding to a more man-centered perspective, it is very easy to go, look, if you can't see this, then you just must not even really be a believer at all. And that is a danger. I'm not saying you're going there, but I've seen people who have. In fact, we talk about the first few months and years after discovering the traditions of men that are often out there that sort of masquerade and mask over the glory of God. We frequently refer to that as the cage stage, where it would be better if you were locked in a cage so that you don't injure yourself or others. Because of the excitement, and you have seen, it's sort of like when I read The Holiness of God by R.C. Sproul, and I was just overwhelmed with this sense of God's holiness and His power and His transcendence, and yet His condescension in the gospel, and it's just, I want everyone else to have the same excitement and passion and zeal that I do. But the fact of the matter is, a lot of times they don't. And it's very easy to slip into an attitude where you're like, yeah, well, if you were as spiritual as me, you would, or how can't you see these things? But you got to remember, 2 years before you saw those things, were you unsaved? And if someone else had come along and if you ended up behaving toward them the way you might want to behave toward others, might that not have pushed off your coming to understand these things because of unnecessary offense and so on and so forth? So we really have to be, I think, very careful at that point in how we respond to those folks and draw the dividing line on that matter in love. And what I mean by that is most of the people that I know, we had a guy come into channel Tuesday during the dividing line. Actually came in right before the dividing line. And in channel, he was basically saying Norman Geisler is a lost heretic. He needs to be saved. He's obviously never been saved. And it was a little bit distracting to me because I didn't have time to deal with him, but everybody else was dealing with him during the program and then afterwards for quite some time. Eventually, he determined that we were all lost because we wouldn't agree with him and dismissed us all as being lost. And he's snuck in a couple times to cause problems since then. But that kind of an attitude is out there, and it is, I don't judge people's hearts along those lines. I've obviously, I think, demonstrated that I'm willing to respond to the errors of Norman Geisler on these subjects. But hopefully I've modeled a respect for the man, the fact that he's written some great stuff. And in fact, one of the reasons I've focused upon him is because I hold him to a higher standard. I mean, I hold him to a much higher standard than I do Dave Hunt. I mean, Norm has, his general introduction to the Bible is a great resource. He's done good work on the resurrection and things like that. So that's why I hold him to a higher standard is, why aren't you seeing these things? Why don't you see how your own traditions are getting in the way here, just like Adam was just talking about in the previous call. So But I'm not kicking these people out of the kingdom. I will refute their teachings, and I will warn people this is a sub-biblical perspective. This is a sub-biblical presentation that is being made here. But I think we have to distinguish between the person and their traditions and the sub-biblical nature of these things. And we have to allow the Spirit of God the freedom to open our eyes and our minds at His chosen point and not at my chosen point. And since God's done it for you and me, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's time for all of those human traditions to be done away with other people, because as you probably would testify, it's a world-shaking thing.
Yeah.
It changes how you view God. It changes how you view yourself. It changes how you view others. It changes how you view the church, worship, the whole nine yards. And so that's got to be left in God's hands. So, some people would say I'm a compromiser for that. I don't think I'm compromising at all. If anyone could look at me and say I've been willing to compromise the doctrines of grace, given the constant attack that I'm under for defending the doctrines of grace and how many doors have been slammed in my face, they would love to have me to talk about Islam, or they'd love to have me to talk about the King James only thing. They'd love to have me to talk about Roman Catholicism, but just such a shame you're a Calvinist. Okay? I've obviously been willing to stand up for what I believe on those matters, but at the same time, I try to model a sense of recognizing that this is something God does when He changes someone's heart. And I've seen a lot of people come to know the doctrines of grace because I presented them to them biblically and didn't just cram it down their throats. And I think that's the only way it really happens, is that the Spirit of God makes it come alive in someone's heart.
Thank you.
All righty?
Thank you.
All righty?
All right. Bye-bye.
All righty. I was